Okay, Chapter 5 deals with the topic of putting together, doing a review of the literature. And this makes a lot of sense for it to be a fairly early chapter in this course, because it's one of the things that really makes sense at the beginning of a study to conduct a literature review. And let's talk about that for a minute. To be able to put together a good study, you need to come up with something that adds to what we already know, that contributes somehow and adds somehow to what we already know. Well, what do we already know? What we already know is what has been the research that has been published, the studies that have been published before now. And so you don't really know what a good study is going to be until you know what's already been done. Because if you just say, oh, I'm really interested, let's say, for example, that I want to do a study on the relationship between self-control and violent behavior. There is a theory called self-control theory that the idea is that crime is typically an impulsive thing, that you don't think before you act. And you don't think about the long-term consequences of your behavior, and that people who are low in this habit of thinking things through carefully before acting, they just jump into things, and one of the things that they jump into sometimes is violent behavior. So maybe I want to test that theory and see if it would be supported by data, by data on real people. And so if I just jump in and start putting together a study on that, well, what if I do it in a way that I'm just repeating blindly what's been done before, or I'm not really showing any respect to go and see what other people have done before, what they've found, what problems they ran into, what interesting things they discovered. You need the way that the scientific community works is as a community, that you're supposed to be in step with everybody else in the community, and that you're all kind of working as this big, huge team towards the truth. And if you ignore what everybody else has done prior to your coming along, then it's dismissing everybody's work. Everybody's worked so hard to produce these studies before you, and you come along and act like nothing's ever been done and just like you're starting from square one. That's not the way to do it. So the first step is you need to learn what's already been done. And then from there, you try to come up with an idea that's something new, that adds further, that asks a question that hasn't been asked so far, something that fills in a gap that hasn't been filled before. That's how you come up with a good study plan. And so what you see before you here is not your typical PowerPoint slides, but instead I'm at the university's library website to show you folks, to walk through the nuts and bolts using an example here of how to find a research paper. Because what you need to do if you're trying to learn what's already been done is you have to search and track down those papers, the research that's been done that's relevant to your topic. You got to find those, and you got to read them through so that you can learn what we already know. And the way you do that is, or a good first step is to go to your library website and to do a search and to see what's out there. So I'm sitting here. You can see that I'm sitting here at the library's website. And the library website right up front has a nice, handy search called OneSearch, which it's a quick search to get you started to be able to begin this journey of finding relevant articles. And so let's try to find some articles, relevant articles. So a good way to try to find relevant articles is to use key terms. There's only one way of doing this, but I'm going to show you maybe a typical way I might try to find articles. And so you want to rely, it's a good idea to rely on keywords. And since typically you're going to want to have two keywords because most studies are interested in, particularly in the relationship between two variables. In this case, we're interested in the relationship between self-control and violent behavior. So those are our two concepts, and those two concepts, we were really interested in studies that deal with the relationship between those two concepts, low self-control and violent behavior. Now, low self-control, there's other terms that they use, like impulsivity. So impulsivity would be another key term, and there's no, perfect word here. It's searching for the right papers is again, it's kind of a trial and error process. There's no perfect way to do it, so you have to have a little patience to be able to do this. It's not something that's always exactly straightforward. But anyway, the two key terms that make sense to me to help us find articles is, and I'm typing in here, self-control, and let's type in, you could type in violence, but I know from experience that typing the word violent may be the better choice there. But it's trying to get at those two concepts, self-control and violence. We're not interested in all studies that deal with violence. That's too big, and we're not interested in studies that are truly just about self-control. We're looking at the connection between those two, so it makes sense to use those two key terms. So we go ahead and we run that search, hit the button there. Let's go ahead and pause that right there, and we'll start up. This is just a short intro. We'll start up here in just a second.